Hi there, I'm Andrea Rollins, and today we are going to be discussing ethics and worldview in relation to instructional design. First, we will briefly review what instructional design is. Then, we will discuss some ethical considerations. And finally, we will view it all through a biblical worldview lens. So what is instructional design? It's the practice of designing, developing, and delivering learning experiences systematically. It assists learners with acquiring and applying knowledge and skills, proven methodologies to standardize the process, and create measurable goals. The ultimate goal is to create effective, engaging, and accessible learning experiences. There are many models that were created to guide the instructional design process. These are a set of guidelines and best practices that help create learning experiences that are engaging, effective, and efficient. One of the most popular models that many others were shaped from is the ADDIE model. There are 5 phases in the ADDIE model: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. During the first phase, the instructional designer is identifying the needs of the learners and determining learning objectives. Once the analysis phase is complete, the instructional designer moves into the design phase, where they are considering what type of learning strategies to utilize, such as instructor-led discussions or lectures, hands-on activities, or assessments. The next phase, the development phase, is where the designer is creating the actual learning materials and resources, like the handouts and slides. The actual presentation or session is the implementation phase. It is important for the designer or instructor to be collecting data and feedback during the learning experience so they are able to assess the effectiveness in the last phase, the evaluation phase. In addition to all of the things we just discussed, there are still more issues to consider when planning learning experiences. As instructional designers, it is our job to make sure that we are not violating any ethical issues. First, you need to be aware of your own ethical code. Ethics are the moral principles that govern a person's behavior. Think about, what are your intentions? Are you thinking about doing better for society or what society thinks of you? What are the effects of what you are doing? What values do you use to judge? What do you consider as good or bad? And what vision of the good life do your designs convey? It is a good idea to create a set of moral principles as a team before beginning a project. Instructional designers should aim to create learning experiences that make all participants feel welcomed, valued, and respected. On the next slide, we will discuss a few areas to consider when planning. First, the designer should consider accessibility. During the analysis phase of the design process, the designer is learning all about the target audience. This should include any learning impairments. For example, knowing ahead of time if there are learners with visual impairments can guide the designer to include an audio component so that those learners can appropriately access the content. When planning the format of the presentation, the designer needs to choose a platform that is easily accessible to all learners. This might mean the difference between an in-person, all-in-one session versus a learn-as-you-go online learning management system. If the designer does not consider accessibility, there is a risk of excluding learners. Another consideration is privacy. All information should be handled responsibly. Data collected should be limited to only what is necessary for the purposes of the learning experience. It is also a good idea to communicate with participants how the data collected will be utilized and shared. A breach of privacy could include the risk of information being leaked and a possible loss of trust and reputation. Also, keep in mind that different areas of the country and world have laws and regulations regarding privacy and property rights. So as an instructional designer, you will want to be aware of those. Another area that the instructional designer should be considerate of when designing learning experiences is inclusivity and diversity. This includes information regarding unique aspects of the individual learners, such as cultural backgrounds. It is important for the designer to allow for learners to bring in their own experiences so that they can feel valued and respected. As an instructional designer, you should also be careful to avoid personal biases and stereotypes when planning learning experiences. It is a good idea to have another team member or outsider preview the content before presenting it in order to receive feedback and hopefully avoid bias and discrimination. Biblical worldview is based on the infallible Word of God. It is how Christians go about viewing and relating to the world around them from teachings garnered from the Scriptures. A biblical worldview demands integrity in personal and professional life, honesty, and service to others. As we have seen in Genesis 1:27, each individual is created in the image of God, which from the point of view of an instructional designer speaks to the necessity of valuing and promoting diversity among all learners. This calls for the creation of content that is inclusive, accessible, and sensitive to culture. No learner shall be made to feel at a disadvantage or excluded due to his or her background and capabilities. In Ephesians 4:25, we are called to speak the truth in love. Instructional designers should create honest presentations of information that are not manipulated or contain misinformation. Whether we design for corporate training, higher education, or K through 12, we have an obligation to present content that is accurate and well researched. Matthew 22:39 gives the command to love others as ourselves. We, as instructional designers, need to have empathy in our designs. We have to know the needs of our learners and design experiences with compassion and consideration. The key takeaway from today's presentation is that instructional designers need to consider ethical issues to design effective learning experiences.